Welcome back to SicEm365 Radio. It's time for our weekly segment with Grayson Grundhafer of SicEm365.com. Brought to you by Pioneer Steel and Pipe, where customer service is their main focus. And best in metal, steel, and pipe for large or small projects, with 2 locations in Waco and Bryan. Family owned and operated since 1943.
All right. We normally have Grayson Grundhafer on Fridays at 3:45. He also records the Bearcast, an hour-plus long show about everything Baylor with Craig that gets up on the site by Tuesday evening. And he joins us today because Friday he's just basically told me he's not available. And so, but he did offer today, and so I'm glad he did. No, Grayson, hey, hope you're doing well. Hope you're feeling okay. Thanks for your time. All right, I know we usually pop in with recruiting with you, but let's get to the camp. It's about to start. All of this college football expansion, the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma. Somebody asked me today, when was the last time somebody asked you about who would be the starting quarterback at Baylor? And honestly, I have no idea. It seems like this has been completely overshadowed. So set us up with that battle and what you expect to see.
Yeah, this is actually great timing because I'm actually working on an article kind of for the fall camp, just kind of previewing it a little bit. And I'm actually working on a section about the 2 guys who I do believe will be in the race for the starting quarterback position for Baylor, which are Gerry Bohanon and Jacob Zeno. Obviously, Blake Shapen is still in the mix, but I think it's kind of become obvious that this is probably going to be a head-to-head battle. And I think this is the battle that everyone was expecting heading into spring football and now fall camp. And I think really just kind of looking at the 2, there was a lot of momentum for Jacob Zeno throughout spring football, and it was because he had such a good spring camp and was really doing everything they needed from him and was doing everything they needed to see and really just excelled. All camp was just fantastic, to be honest with you. But in the weeks leading up to, I guess not even the weeks, and probably the week leading up to the green and gold game, and then, of course, the green and gold game, Gerry Bohanon really started to ascend and really started to make that competition a true competition. Obviously, that culminated with Gerry having a very good performance in the green and gold game and Jacob not having a very good performance at all. And so when you kind of look at that, that's really led to so many conversations heading into fall camp. Both guys really have a lot to prove. Neither one has really done a whole lot. If you look at their stats throughout their careers, there really hasn't been a whole lot of, proving what you can do outside of Gerry having shown moments with his legs where he looks terrific. And Jacob, on the other hand, obviously the Oklahoma game in the Big 12 championship is the moment that stands out for him. So both guys have little moments here or there, but they need to put it all together and show that they can be a consistent football player for the Baylor Bears and a true leader for this football team.
Do you get an idea now after the depth chart was released in spring and maybe more looking at it where the offensive line is in Smokey's reports about some of the things earlier, that where the offensive line is kind of winding to that road?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. It's really tough when you look at the depth chart that was released because of how many oars there are on that depth chart. And I think that as fall camp approaches and as things start to solidify themselves, I do feel like guys will start to rise to the top and maybe take over roles. Now, I think Connor Galvin is going to be your left tackle. I really don't think there's going to be a whole lot of competition there for that position. And I also think Jacob Gall is going to be your starting center. I don't think that there's a whole lot of debate in that either. The other positions are definitely up in the air. I would say that there's going to be a true competition everywhere else. If I were kind of a betting man right now, I would say I think Grant Miller will probably get the start at right guard, leaving that left guard position kind of wide open, where guys like Micah Matsua, who has the talent, could be an NFL guy. Can he really solidify himself at that left guard spot, or will a guy like Moj Jeffrey or Giancarlo Valens really push him at that position? And then, of course, guys, the position that I think is still continues to be way up in the air is right tackle. Casey Phillips had a nice spring camp and has a little bit of momentum there, but Gavin Byers showed some flashes last year as well. So that's going to be a nice battle to follow throughout fall. I think it's still way up in the air, to be honest with you, though.
If I made the prediction that Abram Smith is going to be Baylor's Offensive Player of the Year, would you think I'm crazy?
Oh, man. Yeah, probably. And honestly, Craig, it's not because of the role. It's honestly more because of the position that he plays. And that's the hardest part because, you can justify giving Abram the ball as much as you gave John Lovett the ball, but you're still going to be giving Treston Ebner the ball as well, if that makes sense. It's going to be a true, kind of duel in the backfield. I think both are going to get tons of reps, and that obviously takes away opportunities for Abram Smith. Now, if he's going to be one of your top 5 offensive players, I definitely can see that because he can be a true workhorse for this offense. But again, I mean, if you're just going to look at productions and stats and kind of the numbers, I don't know if he'll be there. And it's kind of similar to what John Lovett had to go through the last 3 years where the numbers weren't insane, even though we all know the kind of impact that he had.
So they're going to go to this blocking one cut, the wide zone or whatever. And how many people in college football actually run that type of running game or that kind of blocking scheme? I'm not asking you like for 57 programs, but is it common or is it more of the exception because of the wide open offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are some nuances to it that are common throughout college football. I know Buffalo ran a style of it. They're probably the most comparable to what BYU did a year ago. But I mean, the way you go about running a wide zone can be different everywhere. I know LSU ran it for a while before they had Joe Brady, just a different way of doing it, though, more from the I formation, but still using that same kind of mindset with the wide zone blocking. And there's a lot of schools that, again, use concepts of it. But I would say that what we've heard from Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes, they may be the most just kind of, we're running the wide zone. We're not going to do a whole lot different than that. We know what we are. We're going to stick to it. Whereas I believe, a lot of the other schools that do run wide zone probably run variations of it that are maybe a little bit more different and probably not quite to the same level of talking about it as much. I think Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes are doing a nice job of saying we're going to build a culture offensively around this, which means we're going to be a very physical and fast football team. And I think that's going to show on the field more so than just saying, hey, we run a wide zone. It's a little bit different than you. I think it's going to be a true mindset and culture for this offense.
At wide receiver, Grayson, obviously it's important for a lot of the guys who had tough years last year, like Tyquan Thornton, to bounce back and be who they were in 2019. But there's a bit of a gap between some of the senior guys who are going to be gone next year at that position, and then some young guys who have opportunities to step up. How important is it for Baylor to see a couple of those young guys, even if they're not going to play major roles early on in the season, step up and show that they can early in camp?
Yeah, I think that's the key is that they have really good camps because I think if you look at the depth chart and some of the guys who Baylor has, I think it's going to be kind of difficult for many of those true freshmen to play a huge role in this offense. If I were to bet on 2 of them that I think could get playing time this year, it would be Hal Presley and Javon Gibson. But I just think it's going to be tough for more than maybe 2, maybe 3 if injuries start happening. Because if you look at the other guys, a lot of them are seniors and veterans. So you're right. They do need to see some strides from the freshmen. They took a bunch of freshmen in that class in 2021 because they need depth there. And they also need high-end talent there, which I think a lot of times in those middle classes is lacking a little bit because for junior and sophomore, you only have Jackson Gleason and Jalen Ellis. And those are 2 guys that I need to highlight since we're talking about wide receiver. I think it's important that the freshmen show what they can do, but those 2 guys I think are going to need to be big factors in fall camp because there's been a lot of promise about both of them, a lot of hope for both of them, and they need them to be major depth pieces in this wide receiver room. And not only can they be depth pieces, I think a guy like Jalen Ellis could honestly end up being their third best receiver, might even end up being one of their top two receivers, because I just think he fills a need and a role as far as being a deep threat and a guy who can just absolutely take the top off the defense. And I'm very interested to see what kind of fall camp he has and kind of how he progresses moving forward. And Gleason can kind of do the same thing. He had some pretty good reports during spring football as well, but he just needs to prove he can stay healthy and be more consistent out on the football field.
Where does Gavin Holmes fall into that mix?
Yeah, I mean, he was banged up a lot during spring football, so I mean, his recovery is going to be probably a big storyline, I would say, for this team going into fall camp, because how quickly can he get to 100% and really establish a role for himself? And I think when you look at Gavin, he's probably going to be part of that group with Drew Estrada and Josh Fleeks, who kind of provide that slot receiver role when they go three wide receivers, with the ability to get jet sweeps, take quick screens, bubble screens, things like that. I think that's going to be kind of a role that he fills more so, whereas Gleason and Ellis probably filling in more on the outside to give them some depth at that position as well. But yeah, I mean, Holmes fits in that mold right now, but he's going to have to figure out a way to get past Estrada and Fleeks on the depth chart, which obviously won't be easy because those two guys are very talented as well.
You were involved in the J.J. Patton from Tenaha, committed to Baylor over Michigan. Arkansas was, of course, deep into the mix, and Texas was still there. I mean, he would have committed to Texas. That would have been a commitment for Texas. Brian Nance was apparently very involved in this recruitment of J.J. Patton. I think this might be his first hit as a young coach. How important is that for it to be maybe right now their top-rated recruit in the class of 2022?
Yeah, it's huge. And honestly, I think just to kind of reiterate what you said about Brian Nance has been massive for just building their recruiting class in general, especially with some of the higher ranked prospects such as Jeremy Patton. He just has done such a good job building a relationship with him, and it's been massive. And Jeremy Patton, I mean, the timing of it, the battle that they had to go through to land him, I think this is the most impressive commit they've gotten in the 2022 class, and it's for those reasons. I mean, the timing is just, it's absolutely horrible for Baylor. Coming off a 2-7 season, the realignment question marks that a lot of recruits have and a lot of people have in general. And they were still able to land Jeremy Patton over, a bunch of good schools. I mean, we talk about Michigan and Texas and Oklahoma State and TCU. This is massive. And he was district MVP in 2A. Really, really good football player. And I think that's the biggest thing. He's good everywhere. He plays offense at running back. He plays receiver. He plays defense, obviously, very well. Had 120 tackles this year. And that Dave Aranda and Ron Roberts are going to try to mold him similarly to what Dave Aranda did with guys like Patrick Queen or Devin White. And I think he's going to fill in really nicely to that will linebacker position. And he could be a guy who gets on the field very early. It would not shock me if he was pushing for playing time by the time he was a redshirt freshman. I think you're onto something there. This is probably the biggest pickup they've had in this class, and Brian Nance did an outstanding job recruiting Jeremy Patton, and that was Patton's first phone call when he decided Baylor was going to be the place for him.
What a great story it was, Grayson. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the week into the weekend. That's Grayson Grunhafer, SicEm365.com's recruiting analyst. He and Craig again. Bearcast that is on Tuesdays, and then also up on the premium site by that evening, and also on the Twitter page. Craig's got a note here that is